Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. Great to have you here on this Friday morning. We are here to help answer your toughest job search questions. My name is Shira Lotzar. Happy to be your host today. And a little bit about me. I'm an association recruiter, also a career coaching and branding expert. I help people write compelling resumes and LinkedIn profiles and beef up their networking and interviewing. I'm also the co-founder and volunteer at boomerworks.org. We are an all-volunteer organization helping professionals age 50 plus to re-career into self-employment. We have lots of educational programs. Check us out at boomerworks.org. Our guest experts today, Julien Bois, an executive recruiter in the accounting and finance area. Corliss Jackson, career coach with federal government resume. She's all things federal government. KiKi L'Italien, consultant and video expert, social media expert, and Mike Robinson, who's a career coach in the government contract in high-tech sectors. So welcome, everyone. And today, the format is, of course, first of all, please remain muted when you're in the main room, and you can post your questions in the chat. And then we will begin with a 10-minute breakout session. And our new format here, which we've done for the last couple of weeks, is in your group. What you'll be doing is you'll be sharing your top job search question with your group, but also any power lessons, any tips, any best practices you've really gleaned from either your current job search or a past job search, just so we can start to kind of crowdsource the wisdom, right, that we've learned over the years with each other. We will then come back for a big group discussion, and the last couple of weeks that's worked really well. I think you guys probably appreciated that, where it's just sort of one big discussion where we'll all share tips, and we, the experts, will be able to answer your questions, and we'll kind of keep this fairly organic. After that, at 10 o'clock, we'll offer a 15-minute speed networking breakout session. A lot of you have found value from that, so make sure to stick around if you can. And then make sure to keep in touch with our Power Networking spreadsheet. It's a Google spreadsheet where you can fill in your information, what you're looking for, your LinkedIn profile, email address, and so forth, so you guys can keep in touch. And I will be putting that information into the chat in just a minute, as well as the link right here for the recording after the session, okay? So in just a minute, we're gonna go ahead and get into breakout rooms, so stick with me for just a minute here while I put all this together. All right, and so make sure to hit the blue join button when you see it so you can enter your room. Hi, Jean, you're assigned to breakout room number 3. Not sure if you know that. You should be able to hopefully see it in the breakout room section. Hey, Pamela, I just sent you a join request to go into a breakout room. We're doing speed networking, or a little bit of networking around power tips. Hi, Tiffany. I just assigned you to a breakout room that people will be in for the next few minutes. We're sharing power lessons for job search tips.
We're back.
Everybody's back. Excellent. Hope you had a rousing time sharing ideas with each other. All right, so now we're going to open up for group discussion. So I'd love to kind of popcorn around the room and start with power lessons. So tips and pieces of advice that you have gleaned from your job search that you might have shared within your group that maybe everybody could benefit from. So who would like to start? Seema, are you trying to talk?
I'll be bold.
Oh, Janice,
I'll be bold.
You'll be bold. Help us out.
I'll be bold. So I got tired of not being with people. So I reached out to one of my crazy past lives and said, I'm going to volunteer at my local airport, which is a small county run, nothing major. I volunteer twice a week. I take one of my boys each day because they need to learn that also. They need to volunteer and they're interested in aviation. So it's a family thing. And one day someone came in to look at an airplane that we had on display. And he's like, hey, do you have any part-time jobs open? We're like, sure. So ended up, we hired him as a part-time employee. And then when he worked with me, he's like, you're unemployed, right? Indeed, I am. He goes, at my real job, I've got a full-time opening. So I didn't take the full-time job. I took the part-time job, but I'm absolutely adoring my part-time work on the weekend at an airport, meeting a ton of people and having a great time. And I still do my volunteer work as well. So volunteer, get out there, reach, stretch.
Excellent. Give back and you never know what you'll receive in return. Thanks, Janice. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. All right, so who else has a power lesson? Something that's worked for you that might work for somebody else. We could also go into the chat. All right, so unless somebody else wants to chime in. Okay. Yeah.
So there was a question from my group that actually has to do with when there are issues that are sort of personal in nature. You can't bring it up in your job interviews, but because of situations that are very difficult, contentious divorce or having a high-risk child that you're dealing with at home that has impacted previous performance and your previous job. How do you go about navigating conversations when you're going out for a fresh start and you're asked questions about previous employers and experiences?
Yeah. I've had this situation, a number of clients I've dealt with have had this. Of course, every situation is unique, right? But at the end of the day, life does happen and employers do understand that because they're humans too, right? They've had life happen. Now, that said, that does not mean that we should be going into the detail necessarily, unless it's relevant. What I would suggest is this: before even thinking about what you say, you need to get into sort of this emotional place that says, look, the employer did not experience what you experienced. As far as they're concerned, they just need you to do a job, okay, in the future. And they are curious about your past performance as it relates to your ability to do that job in the future. The fact that you've had extenuating circumstances in your personal life that might have prevented you from doing it as well as you might have liked, is important only in that you can share, hey, I went through a personal situation, very generic. You don't have to mention, and nor do I believe should you mention, if it had anything to do with your health or what's going on with your children or what have you, but simply to say, look, I did have and by the way, you don't even have to talk about this unless it actually is relevant. In other words, if you got unfortunately let go from a position because of all of this, what you might want to say then is simply, look, that was a period of my life. I was going through a personal transition. There were some extenuating circumstances that unfortunately I can't go into right now, but they did impact my ability to do my job as well as I would have liked at that time. My life has changed since. Things are back to normal. I'm fully present, accounted for, ready to go, and just sort of gloss right over it. What you don't want to do is bring a lot of any actually emotion to the situation, right? You want to be at a kind of a calm, kind of stable place to say, look, that was then, this is now, I've moved forward and I'm ready to go. So that would be my response. Mike, Julien, I'm not sure is quite back yet, or Corliss, or even KiKi. Do you guys want to chime in on this?
Yeah, so I'll just say that, if this personal situation, if this tough situation at work, if it ended well, so if the manager, or if there was something that ended well about it, maybe you can say something about, we ended on good terms. My manager, was willing to help me with this and that, and something to say if there was something positive about it towards the end that can show that, despite this tough situation, they still supported or believed in you, so forth. So that's my thought.
And even if not, because again, sometimes things happen, you could then just sort of, that was then, this is now, and and kind of move on. So yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was moving on to the next question, but if we have any other comments.
Corliss, did you need to add anything? You're good? Okay. All right, KiKi.
Okay, so our next question is from group 1, and their question was, how do we market ourselves in a job search, commercial and federal, when we are halfway through the certification process?
Halfway through the certification process. If the person is willing to raise their mic and to share what is more specifics of what they mean by that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm currently taking a Google IT support certification. It's the first part of the larger, looking into cloud. And I'm halfway through the course. Yeah. So I gotten some where I can put badges on LinkedIn so they'll see it, but I don't have the full test yet. So struggle of how to word it or how to approach it, since I'm not completely done with it, even though I'm done with parts, and how I could use it for my benefit.
Yeah, to me, it's pretty straightforward. And Mike, feel free to chime in because I know this is also your area, but regardless of whether you're pursuing certification, a degree, anything, sort of anything that's continuing education, you can simply say, first of all, on your resume, pursuing XYZ certification, pursuing XYZ, higher education, whatever. And you could even put in parens after that, anticipated graduation or anticipated completion X date, if you know. And even if you don't know, just simply say pursuing. It's perfectly honest. I think it's straightforward. Mike, did you have any thoughts about that? Yeah. And the same thing with with LinkedIn. If you wanted to put it on LinkedIn, now in the certification section, and I have to go back and look at the specifics. I I don't remember whether you have to put the date. I think you can just write in, and you could, I think you can simply say there to pursuing XYZ. Okay. And then when you get it, then you'd go double back, and then you would say completed. So you can put it anywhere you want, as long as you are honest about what your status is. Okay.
Okay. So I had a private message that had to do with when you get pushback, you get feedback. Specifically, this person has an executive assistant background, but they've also acted as director of different roles. They want an executive assistant role, but what they keep hearing back is that they don't have a traditional EA experience. So, ideas, suggestions, how should they go about so that they can maybe navigate this a little bit better when they go into these future job interviews?
So I'll start, and feel free, guys, to jump in. In fact, also those of you on the call who have done these kinds of, who've had sort of eclectic careers and have maybe successfully navigated, but the tip that I typically give is, regardless of whether it's this type of role or another, is it's all about your brand, right? It's all about having a consistent brand. So if you are, in this case, going after an executive assistant brand, that needs to be everywhere. That needs to be on the top of your LinkedIn, right? Executive assistant, or the type of executive assistant you are, or the kind of qualities you have. In the about section of your LinkedIn, a whole sort of narrative about your superpowers as an executive assistant and why you enjoy it and the way you love to serve. In your resume, same thing. You start with a heading, and the heading, this is below your address, your name and address and so forth, but your heading, right? So accomplished executive assistant, that kind of thing. And then everywhere you can down the page, you highlight those skills. So even if you were a director of something or another, and if you used administrative skills, you'd want to highlight that. You'd want to de-emphasize anything that is irrelevant to the EA work and uplift anything that is. And an example I've given, for those of you, some of you might have heard me share this on a previous call, but many years ago, I was coaching somebody who was an attorney. And he wanted to be a recovering attorney. He didn't want to be an attorney anymore. But it turns out he wanted to be a writer, right? So how do you turn an attorney into a writer? Well, I went through his resume, and we pulled out every single aspect of writing that he had done and created a LinkedIn profile that talked about his writing. Everything was writing brand. And it turns out he did get a job as a journalist with a legal trade publication, okay? But that was because it was a very, very intentional effort. So again, in the resume, make sure you call out all of those competencies, in this case, that's related to being an EA, de-emphasize things which are not. And so then you have a more consistent brand. It'd be a little bit easier to make the case when you're in an interview. So that's my thoughts. Mike, KiKi, Corliss?
I would just add, Shira, that another term for this is using transferable skills.
Right.
You might have heard of that term before. That's what you want to fill your resume up with and fill your conversation with in the interview.
Yes. And your passion for it, because if you really are a rock star EA and that's what you love, let it shine. This isn't just about what you've done in the past, it's what you want to do in the future and why you want to do it. Employers really get into that because at the end of the day, they want to minimize their risk, they want to maximize their results, and they want someone who's in it to win it, right? Who loves to do this work, is not just capable. So you want to really emphasize the why behind what you want to do, not just your credentials.
All right. Excellent. I really like that too, because that idea of sort of thinking of it as sort of branding yourself as a particular role, whether it's LinkedIn or even as, the words that you're using when you're going in and you're talking about your experience and your role, I really think that that's great advice. So excellent. Group 2 has a question. How can we increase responsiveness on LinkedIn when networking with peers within the same field?
Yeah. So I have a lot to say on this one. Mike, Corliss, KiKi, any of you want to chime in first?
Let's see. So I just did this a couple of days ago with someone I had not spoken with in about 13 years. And so just my thoughts are to make it very personal, where you're not just saying, hey, can you help this person? Can you do this? But you're reconnecting with this person. You are asking them how they're doing. You're asking if you can help them with anything. You are making it a very thoughtful, personal message that can help with responsiveness. That's just my quick thought.
Yeah, I would back up Mike on that and say that building on that, what I've seen is that, and I'm sure you've experienced it, everyone's experienced it at this point, where it's hard sometimes to know what someone's after, what they're getting at when they reach out to you on LinkedIn. So I would probably, ask a question back to you and say, how are you going about this now? And what is it that you're really trying to achieve with this, with the networking? Because networking can mean a lot of different things. And if it's about relationship building, and if it's about wanting to connect with people who might be influencers in your industry or be connected to people you want to know, there's my colleague. Then what I would do is I would, really try to approach it from a human perspective, just like Mike was saying, and make sure that they know that you're not trying to sell them something or do something where you're trying to corner them. Just letting them know up front that you're wanting to get to either know them better, connect with them better, talk about a certain topic. We have my colleagues going off of the rails, so I'm going to put myself on mute. Shira, LinkedIn Master, what do you have to say?
That's great. So this is terrific. So I think there's really kind of at least two legs to that networking stool as it relates to what you guys are talking about. Number one, absolutely, is the relationship building. People want to know, that you care and that you're trustworthy and that you want to like sort of know them personally. At the same time, I believe there's another leg to the stool, and I'll put that in the category of thought leadership. I'll put that in the category of sort of the professional connection side of things. And so depending upon whether you have something thoughtful to say about what you do, such that your colleagues will be interested, or you want to, if you will, glom on to what other people are saying about your profession or your industry, the LinkedIn thread actually can be a really, really powerful way to do that. And so one of the easiest things that you can do is to start to look for content where you're in the profession or in the industry. Some of you have heard me talk about tribe and lane. So the tribe is the industry, the lane is the profession. And what you would do is you'd go to the search bar in the upper left, and you would type in whatever your topic is. So let's say you're into environmental nonprofits, clean energy, you're into, I don't know, whatever issue it is, accounting, finance, what have you. And what you would do is, in fact, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I wasn't planning to do this, but I will, Johnny on the spot, do it. You would actually look for content in that area. So here you go. We'll go ahead and share right here. Okay, so here, if I were in the search bar, let's say I'm looking for, I'm in the clean energy space, or I want to be. I would type that in here and I would hit enter. Okay, then I would go to the more button and hit content. And now all the sort of clean energy type posts are going to come up in my thread. And what I would do is I would go and so here's one. So maybe I'm interested in this post that William Mills, is interested in, that he posted. So I would go down here to the share button, I'd share it, and then I'd write something like a one-liner or a two-liner commenting on his post. And by doing that, by association, I'm aligning myself with his perspective. And the more you do that, the more of a thought leader you could end up becoming. Now, of course, if you want to get bold and write your own blog posts or post your own things, that's great too. But a really, really easy way to build your network is by sharing other people's posts and by commenting and liking, and you might even ask a question of that person. Maybe you want to link in with them and say, hey, I was really interested in what you shared. Would you mind, would you be interested in having an offline conversation, just because you want to show that you are sort of connected with their messaging and you want to be part of their collegial network. So that's a thought around that. All right, so KiKi, are you still with us? Is your colleague still making some making some noise?
She's calming down a little bit. We have some construction going on outside of this office door, so she's trying to protect, you know. So yes, I'm back. All right. So there are no additional questions in the chat right now.
Okay. So who else would like to share just kind of a live question that came up for you, or again, another power tip? Otherwise, we can go ahead and us experts can share some. Oh, we have a question about salary expectation.
Shira, we're not hearing you.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Can you hear me?
I wasn't sure if that was just me or.
Can you hear me?
So the question is,
Yep.
yes, we can now.
Okay, good. Oh, good. All right. So the question is about.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
The question's, yes. The question is about what is the best way to address the question about the salary expectation?
Great. So some of you might know I have a little speech around this, but we all have different ways of approaching it. And Mike, would love to hear your thoughts when you're ready. I'm sure you've heard this. And Corliss, would love to hear your response from a federal government perspective as well. Okay, so I liken the salary negotiation discussion to buying and selling a house. Okay, so in buying and selling a house, you've got one side that wants to pay as little as possible and one side that wants to get as much as possible. That is exactly what's going on with your job search. It is the employer's responsibility, actually, to be as fiscally responsible as they can be in negotiation. And of course, it's your job to try to get as much as you can. So let me just backstory this and say, I realize the question was about salary expectation, but I do want to address something that wasn't mentioned, and that is if somebody asks about salary history. So you all know, last I checked, and I need to get more up to date on this, last I checked, there are 19, I think, states and counties in the union that have made it illegal for employers to ask about salary history. That has to do with pay equity, okay, concerns. Now the DMV, best of my knowledge, is still exempt from that, so a lot of employers just frankly aren't aware of what's going on in the country and may still ask you that salary history question. If they do, you could gently pivot and say, if they say, so what were you last making? Say, well, how about if I share with you what I'm looking for? Okay, that's a very gentle, professional way to pivot off of your salary history. Once you get into that conversation.
Hey, sure, your thing is freezing.
Yeah.
Shoot. Can you hear me?
We can't.
Shira, you're breaking up just a little bit there, and we lost that previous section.
Oh boy. Oh my goodness. All right. So I
said about pivoting.
Yeah. So
Kelly's on it.
Great.
Yes.
So the way to pivot from the question of what were you last making, what was your salary history, to what are you, in other words, to get them off of the salary history question, to pivot gently is to say, how about if I share with you what I'm looking for? That's it, just a one-liner. Did everybody get that? Okay. So in terms of what you say then around what you're looking for, a great way to frame it is as follows. I'm going to give you a formula, right? You may want to write this down. The formula is this. I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the blank range. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. In your negotiations, what you do not want to do, I'm going to say ever, never, never, ever, never. How many times can I say ever, never? Never, ever give two numbers. Why? Because if you give two numbers, which one are they going to give you? The lower one, right? Of course, that's just negotiation. So you want to start with a high number. Now, you notice in this phrase, I put the word range at the end. That was on purpose. Not because in that blank you should put two numbers as a range, but because what you would want to do is put the top number, a comfortable, what I call your happy dance number. It's realistic, but it's on the high end. So let's say, for example, your happy dance number is 120. So you'd say, I'm seeking a total cash comp package in the $120,000 range. In that case, the word range kind of substitutes for the concept of in that general direction. So here's why that works. If you say that, and you actually are within the range that the employer, because every employer has a range, they always do. So in this case, maybe their range is, 100 to 130 or something. Fine, they'll say fine. They won't even negotiate, but they won't say anything. They'll just say great, and they'll write it down, and they'll be done with it. However, just for those of you who are thinking, well, I don't want to price myself out of the market, that phrase still works, because if you say 120 and that is out of their range, that is the only time typically that an employer will actually tell you what the top is. So if you said 120 and they can't pay 120, they'll say, well, and they'll clear their throat and wait 3 seconds, and they'll be a little awkward for a second. And then they'll say, the highest we can actually go is 110 or 100 or 75 or whatever they say. And then they'll say, do you have any flexibility? Now, you may or may not have flexibility depending on what they just said. If they said 110, you might have flexibility. It's only 10K, maybe it's still within your range, and you can say, yes, I do have flexibility. And that's why—
Freezing up again. You're freezing up again.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Shira, we're losing that last piece of it again.
Can you hear
Seems
me
like
now?
the
Shira, you may want to turn off your video. Sometimes it helps.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me now?
yes.
Yes,
Great.
we can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Shoshi. Appreciate that. So what you'd be saying is that if they say, well, do you have any flexibility? Then you're going to say, well, actually I do. This is why I mentioned that I'm seeking a total cash compensation package. Now you have the right at this stage to say, can we discuss benefits? Now, normally you wouldn't. Normally you do not bring up benefits in your in any sort of discussion. This is when you can, because they have just given you the right to. They have just said, do you have flexibility? And you're saying, yeah, can we just talk about the benefits package to see if in total we can bring it up to around 120. And then they are typically pretty happy to do that. And whether that's incentive bonuses or tuition reimbursement or 401k match or what have you, normally that's the way that it'll work. Okay. So don't feel that you're going to, get, break, kind of put yourself out of the market. That said, if you said 120 and they said, gosh, wish we could pay you that, we can only pay 75. Guess what? That's probably not the right job for you. It's a pretty big gap. In which case, it's a good thing that they brought it up right up front so that you didn't waste your time and their time. Okay. So actually don't be afraid when an employer asks you that question right up front. It's good so that you don't, again, waste your time in the process, because it can take hours and hours and hours to go through that search, and you want to make sure that you're, investing your time well. So that's my speech around that. Mike, you've been on the recruiter side of things too. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So in addition to everything Shira said, I would say to be objective as a candidate. So let the recruiter know that you've done your research and you've, gone on Glassdoor and you've seen that the project manager in this region, the average project manager makes this much money. So to the extent you can be objective about it, then the recruiter's kind of like, okay, and it just really shows that you're not naive or asking for too much, maybe, when you can kind of couch what your expectations are with something objective and something that's a source that you're referencing. So.
And at the end of the day, they're trying to make the business case, right? So when they go back and do the final negotiations, they want to have their data points ready. And if you can arm them with that as well, that also helps.
So the question, actually it was from me, and I'm speaking to an HR person for this organization who's asking me.